Hi, I'm Georgina and you're listening to Unstill Life. Grab a drink, get comfy, maybe you're painting, maybe you're procrastinating. Either way, we're going to talk about art, the world, and everything in between. I need to talk about something that genuinely made me stop mid-scroll and lose, I think, all faith in humanity. Because apparently now we live in a world where an AI-generated singer named Xania Monet has charted on Billboard, signed a $3 million record deal, and somehow, I don't know how, has over 1 million monthly listeners on Spotify. 1 million monthly listeners for someone who isn't someone, or a voice that doesn't even come from a body. And if all of that wasn't bizarre enough, one of her songs, written by a machine, performed by a synthetic voice, was literally about miscarriage. A fictional avatar performing a trauma it cannot feel or understand and will never experience. It's almost, and I mean this in the most literal art theory way possible, like watching a mannequin try to cry. Because we're now at the point where artificially generated personas are performing grief that never belonged to them, created by people who want the emotional aesthetic of art without the emotional labour of making it. And the thing is, this isn't just messy, it's unethical and painfully revealing about where creativity is heading in 2025. Especially on Spotify, who originally opposed AI-generated music and made a big public stance about protecting humanity, pretty much. But they obviously quietly changed their mind once they realised AI tracks cost nothing, require no royalties, and earn them more profit than actual musicians ever could. So now we have an AI artist with 1 million human listeners singing about human suffering, built from code, packaged like a person, and rewarded by algorithms that no longer care where the art comes from, only how cheaply it can be produced. And that's why I want to talk about this, not as like drama or gossip, but as a real moment in the collapse between authenticity and the machine-made version of it. Because what does art even become when the artist, and I use quotation marks on that, has never lived a single emotion they're singing about? And what does it say about us and the platforms that claim to support creativity when simulated grief charts higher than real voices? So let me break it down a little bit, because the whole Xania Monet situation isn't just weird, it's unsettling in a very specific, very modern way. Xania Monet isn't a person. She's an AI-generated singer, built to mimic the style, voice and aesthetic of real black female artists. Her songs aren't written by her, they're generated by AI tools, refined by ghostwriters, polished with vocal synthesizers, and packaged as if they're coming from some mysterious new breakout star. And somehow this synthetic character ended up with a $3 million record deal, a huge marketing push, and the part that made the internet collectively glitch, she charted on Billboard. And that, I think, was the moment when everything flipped, especially for me, because it wasn't even the AI singer novelty, it's the fact she takes up actual industry space that could have gone to any number of real struggling musicians who actually exist. Because charting, I think, meant something. It used to anyway. It was a marker of cultural impact, of people connecting with the voice and human experience in this art form. So when a non-human entity enters that space, it's not just innovation, as they may claim it to be. It feels like a displacement, or replacement, and reprioritization of profit over expression. And yes, the miscarriage song was part of the uproar too, not because it was the worst thing she did, but because it highlighted the core issue. This artist, again in quotations, performs pain that isn't hers. She sings about heartbreak, loss, grief, trauma, without having lived a single second of any of it. But if we're honest, the miscarriage thing wasn't the main reason people reacted, it was a symptom, a loud example of the bigger problem. The real backlash came from the fact that an AI avatar was being treated as a legitimate charting musician with real human music industry privileges. It's art without the artist, emotion without experience, and that's the line that feels wrong, not because AI exists, but because companies are trying very hard to convince us that sound is the same as meaning. So I suppose the mini thesis of this episode is that AI can generate sound, but it can't generate meaning. Unfortunately, the industry is pretending they're the same thing because meaning is expensive and sound is cheap. And that is where the real problem starts. Let's talk about Spotify for a moment. Well, it's not even just Spotify, it's all music apps at the moment, but Spotify, I think, is the most popular for this. None of this is happening in a vacuum. Xania Monet didn't just appear out of nowhere. She is a manifestation of a much bigger shift, and Spotify is right at the centre of it. What's wild is that Spotify originally opposed AI-generated music. They made statements about protecting artists, authenticity, and human creativity. It sounded very hopeful, but they later changed their tune. Suddenly, AI-generated tracks were allowed again, not just allowed, but encouraged, flooding in and silently multiplying in the background of the platform like some digital mould. Why? Because AI tracks are cheap, they're fast, they're infinitely scalable, and most importantly for Spotify, they require no royalties. A human singer needs to be paid and needs compensation. An AI singer does not. From a business perspective, AI is the dream employee. It works 24/7, it never complains, and costs nothing after the initial setup. Spotify even tried to justify it by comparing AI to synthesizers, saying things like, well, people said the same thing when synths were invented, and new tools always scare musicians at first. But a synthesizer is a tool, they literally admitted that. AI is a replacement. One expands human creativity, the other imitates it cheaply. There's a difference between giving artists new instruments and giving corporations a way to bypass artists altogether. And right now, Spotify is leaning heavily into the second option, because they profit more from AI music than they ever will from real music. Real artists are currently drowning in a sea of algorithmic sludge. Thousands of AI musicians hidden among normal accounts, designed to blend in, recommended by algorithms that don't care whether something is human, only whether it keeps people listening. Spotify isn't pushing what's meaningful, they're pushing what's inexpensive and endless and convenient. That's why Xania Monet exists, not because there was a cultural demand for AI pop stars, at least I hope there wasn't, but because the platform is incentivized to reward anything that costs them the least. It's capitalism disguised as innovation, and we're all supposed to pretend it's the future of creativity when really it's the erosion of it. And the saddest part is that most listeners don't even know. They think they're discovering emerging artists, not AI experiments dressed up as musicians. So yes, Spotify is a huge part of why this is happening now, and of course other apps, because when art becomes a number game, the numbers start winning, and unfortunately, the humans start losing. I would like to jump in a bit and talk about Talisha Nikki Jones, the person behind Xania Monet. And before anything else, this isn't about tearing down a person's appearance, identity, or humanity. It's about analysing the work, the choices, and the ethics behind this AI artist. Nikki describes herself as a poet, programmer, entrepreneur, graphic designer, and when you look at her design business, Nikki Designs Prints LLC, you can see the through line immediately. Her portfolio relies heavily on AI-generated imagery, pre-made templates, mass-market overlays, and the kind of t-shirt hustle you can find on print-on-demand sites. And look, that's a business model. People are allowed to create whatever they want, but it's very clear that her work prioritizes speed, quantity, and trend chasing over artistic intention. So honestly, I'm not surprised she moved into AI-generated music. The jump from AI graphics to AI singer isn't really a jump at all. It's the same mindset applied to a new medium. It's fast, it's scalable, it's low cost, high output, brand first, art second. And that's the actual issue here. Not that she uses AI, not that she wants to create, but that she's presenting AI-generated content as her artistic identity, as if the machine is her voice and her lived experiences are somehow authentically encoded into a digital avatar. We know, or we gather, that she writes the lyrics, and maybe some of those lyrics are rooted in her real experiences. Maybe some of that pain is hers, and that's completely valid. People are allowed to express themselves, but when those feelings are filtered through an AI persona and sung by a synthetic voice, something gets lost, or worse, something gets cheapened. Because grief sung by a machine isn't grief, it's a concept of grief. It's these emotional aesthetics rather than emotional expression. And the bigger ethical issue, I think, is that she built an entire AI persona to perform trauma for commercial gain, to sell songs, sell an identity, sell a brand that doesn't have to share any of the burden of what it's singing about. It feels less like she wanted to be an artist and more like she wanted to create a brand that behaves like an artist. And in this case, AI is the easiest, cheapest, and fastest, most efficient way to manufacture a brand. Which is why Xania Monet exists. She isn't a voice, she's a business model. And honestly, if you look at Nikki's t-shirt designs, You can see the entire philosophy right there. It's not about craft, it's about output. It's about pushing content into the world as quickly and effortlessly as possible. And when you expand that mindset to music and emotion and identity, that's when it starts to deeply feel uncomfortable. I think this is the part of the controversy that really sits heavily with me, because it's not just that the AI is singing or being used, it's what it's singing about. Because when Xania Monet released a song about miscarriage, people were confused at first, rightly so. They were concerned, again, rightly so. And it wasn't because the topic shouldn't be sung about. Of course, people can express their trauma through art. Of course, miscarriage is real and painful and deeply human. And Nikki, the creator behind the AI, may have very well lived some of those experiences herself. That is valid, as I mentioned earlier. She has every right to process it creatively. But turning that experience into an AI performance creates a strange, dissonant gap and disconnects the emotion and the vessel from each other. Because the grief might be real, but the mouthpiece isn't. And that's where it becomes strange. It's like outsourcing heartbreak, automating devastation, and delegating something deeply human to a synthetic voice that can't feel anything it claims to express. It becomes simulated grief, engineered trigger streams, a facsimile of pain packaged as content. And that's where I think people instinctively recoiled, not because they didn't believe the pain existed somewhere, but because it was being funneled through an avatar designed to perform emotion without ever having lived it. But what makes it more unsettling for me is how some of the audience did respond. People were leaving heartfelt comments, sending prayers, saying things like, "You're so strong, you'll get through this, I've been here too." And this was all directed at an AI, a fictional persona. People were consoling a grief that doesn't belong to a person who doesn't exist. And that is such a perfect, eerie snapshot of what's going wrong with art and empathy right now. Because when a machine performs trauma convincingly enough that humans feel compelled to comfort it, something has gone very, very sideways. This is what happens when suffering becomes a marketing tactic. It's strategy. And I think that's the real philosophical gut punch here, because AI didn't do anything wrong. AI can't do anything wrong. It doesn't know grief or loss or heartbreak. It's humans who decided that simulated pain was just as good, or at least just as profitable, as the real thing. And that, I think, is what scares me. And I suppose that's something I keep coming back to, is the fact that AI isn't the villain here. It is a tool, and it is a machine that does exactly what it's told. The real issue is the people using it and the industries that are choosing to use AI as a replacement instead of resource. You end up with art that looks like art but feels like nothing. That's what Xania Monet represents, not innovation but avoidances. Avoiding risk, avoiding emotion, avoiding the slow human process of making something real. And that's why this whole thing hits such a raw nerve, because Xania isn't the problem. She's just a little blinking red light on a much larger cultural dashboard that's telling us something is wrong. We're watching an industry drift towards a future where it's cheaper to imitate emotion than to support the people who actually feel it. And that's the part that makes everything a little bit heartbreaking. This conversation isn't about banning AI, it's not about pretending technology shouldn't evolve, it's not about fear of the future, it's about boundaries and honesty and complete transparency. It should always be about deciding where human expression ends and where corporate simulation shouldn't begin. We're not afraid of AI replacing us, we're afraid of humans using AI to replace us. Humanity can't be programmed no matter how good the software becomes, and that's the conversation worth having. Not is AI bad, but what are we willing to lose in the name of efficiency? Because once authenticity becomes optional, everything starts to feel uncanny, even the things that used to make us feel alive. At the end of the day, this whole conversation comes back to something simple. Authenticity matters. Real art, the human kind, isn't just about technique or sound or aesthetics or production value. It's about transmission. One person feeling something and passing that feeling to someone else. That's why human grief sung through a human voice hits differently. It's why you can hear a tremble or a breath or a crack in the voice and suddenly feel less alone. There's a real nervous system behind that sound. But artificial grief, that's not connection, it's extraction. It takes the aesthetics of pain and removes the person who paid the price for it. It makes emotion something you can mass produce instead of something you live through. And this is where everything crystallizes for me. Art doesn't exist to be efficient, it exists to be felt. The point isn't to produce the most songs or have the fastest output, the cheapest content. The point is to create something that moves people, that reminds them they're not living this life alone. Xania Monet is not dangerous because she exists. An avatar, an AI avatar, cannot harm anyone on its own. She's dangerous because the industry is rewarding her existence, rewarding the idea that authenticity is optional, that feeling is optional, and that humanity itself is optional, as long as the numbers look good. When a machine singing about miscarriage charts higher than real artists, that is not technological achievement, it's a cultural warning sign. Because if the industry keeps pushing synthetic art over human expression, we're going to lose something we won't know how to get back. We're going to lose the quiet, invisible thread that connects one person to another through shared experience, and that tiny thread is the whole reason art exists in the first place. I guess the question at the heart of all this is simple, but also not simple at all. Do you think AI musicians can ever truly be ethical? Is there a version of this future where digital voices and human vulnerability can coexist without replacing each other? Is there ever a place for AI in storytelling about pain, or is that something that belongs only to the people who lived it? Where do we draw the line between tool and impersonation? Between using technology to express yourself and using it to imitate someone else's humanity? Because the line is getting thinner and thinner and the industry is just getting louder. And it feels like we're all being asked to decide what we want art to look like before someone else decides for us. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Truly, please let me know in the comments what you think an ethical future for AI and creativity even looks like, if such things exist at all. And if you want to support real human-made art created by an actual person with an actual heartbeat, my prints and originals are linked in the description below. Thank you for listening, for thinking, and sitting in this strange little space with me. I will see you in the next episode of Unstill Life.